Obviously, it's kind of difficult to speak to everyone because every body is so differently programmed and conditioned. We're so different. But for those who have the ears to hear this, I would like to say something about the absolute innocence of you. That it's understandable that you might feel guilt or shame around certain actions, certain deeds that were done, certain thoughts that the body had, certain actions that led to difficult consequences. And really, it's hard to have a clearer perspective when that sense of me and ownership and responsibility of this body, of my life and my actions, when that heaviness is there, it's really hard to see clearly what's going on. It's really hard to believe that you have nothing to feel guilty about, to feel ashamed of, and that you're so beautiful exactly the way you are. You're so perfect. What's appearing, how the body is right now, how it's conditioned, how it acts. In a way, it's so perfect. It's exactly how it needs to be in this particular moment. Not necessarily because it's leading to something better or greater, but just because life is already complete and whole as it is. And the personal judgments, beliefs, and positions around how this is wrong, how this shouldn't be this way, how I need to be punished, how the other person needs to be punished, how this isn't it. The personal energy, which is just a seeming contraction all over the body, it's just saying no to life. It's a huge resistance to what is. And that too is innocent. That too is just naturally how that sense of individuality functions. Because if you really think about it, it's functioning on top of the fear of everything. The fear of loneliness, of not belonging, of feeling like an outcast, of appearing crazy, of going crazy, of being unloved, of being not accepted. It has so much to fear because it feels as if the whole world is against it. In one way or another, it feels that way. And therefore, it goes out searching for certain things to try and get that stability, to get that safety, that feeling of okayness. And maybe it might last for a moment, perhaps a few years even. But in the end, that was never the answer. that would never really satisfy for very long. It's a constant game of got it, lost it. But do you see how at the very root of that sense of me, it's just fearful of what's to come? What will become of me? And it's so understandable that it would feel that way, that it would feel scared. And usually most people have no idea that that's what's underneath. Only when the sense of self is really confronted. Only when enough shields have been broken through or cracked open, only when the veil is thin enough, can there really be this confrontational fear of my existence, of my safety. And only then can it really be felt fully. And this will vary for everyone. So even if the veil is very, very thick, a spontaneous shift can suddenly happen. But I do think it's quite rare, more rare at least. But for most of us, there is this seemingly slow thinning of the veil. Until it's really able to be punctured in a way where it's not reversible anymore. And this really is one of the scariest places that you can go. Everything that was avoided is felt eventually. It can feel like you have no ground to really stand on at times. And this is the perfect opportunity for the body to get accustomed to feeling uncomfortable, feeling unsure, getting used to the unknown. And this really is energetic. It's not just an idea. Because it's one thing to give up concepts, to let go of labels and ideas and beliefs. It's a whole other thing to energetically lose that within the body. And there's an actual felt sense of confusion, being lost, feeling stuck, not knowing where to go, if there's anywhere to go. I meant this video to be a very happy one where I'm telling you how innocent the conditioning of the body is. But it turned into something scary again. But I was going to say that because that fear is at the base of separation, And it still feels like it's in control and responsible for the actions of the body. Then it's not really possible to unravel the knots of the conditioning that may have really harmed the body, may have really harmed others. Like, I'm not saying through therapy or other things like energy healing, things like that can really unravel the top layers of it. I'm not denying that at all. They have its place and they can be very useful. But I'm saying at the core of it, it can't be unraveled, and you can't really see it with enough distance and neutrality and impersonal awareness, you can say, to really see the absolute innocence in it. That it was never you, that you were never responsible for these things that may have caused you to feel guilty or shameful. So for instance here, one of the biggest things that caused so much pain in this apparent lifetime was the immense tendency to people please. The innocence of needing other people's acceptance and approval by shoving down my own truth, my own feelings, and just pleasing others. Being there for others, giving to others when I was so depleted. The body was so exhausted. And then there was so much built up anger and resentment, and I'm not... The top layers of that were really processed, even when the identity was quite strong here. It took a long time, it seemed. Again, this will vary for everyone. And when the sense of self was really dying, like everything was now in reversal, the sense of control wasn't there nearly in the same way. You know, nothing really made sense. I felt the most loneliest I've ever felt. Felt like I was going crazy sometimes. Felt like I didn't belong anywhere, that no one could ever really understand me. And as that deconstruction was kind of happening, and all of those layers, those deeper layers that were never really touched before, were felt through in a way, choicelessly. Then I could see the pattern of this body, how it was conditioned to please people still. And that was just a mechanism, innocent mechanism in the body that was still running sometimes. And it wasn't fulfilling anymore. You know, it wasn't fulfilling a sense of self that got some approval or acceptance or love. It didn't fulfill anything anymore. And yet it was still running. Like, imagine that. It was still innocently running. And yeah, it was to a much lesser degree, and there was just a very neutral, impersonal noticing that the body was exhausted and that this isn't sustainable. And so actions happened, and the so-called learning was a lot faster, even though this is probably the 100th time that it was seen. But now with such an impersonal observing of it all, a seeing of it all, that this body was so uniquely programmed, and it's different for every body. It's so uniquely flawed, so uniquely imperfect, and that's okay. When there isn't ownership of it anymore, like it's not mine, then because the guilt and shame isn't there, in a way it can potentially unravel and soften on its own, because now it's not a problem. Now it's not seen as something wrong that needs to be fixed and pushed away, and it doesn't say anything about anything. And what a relief that is. So why I say this is because, in a way, you never needed to change, and in a way, you couldn't completely get rid of the thing that you're trying to get rid of, because it is an innocent part of that body. And it's so beautifully imperfect. It's so beautifully flawed. We're trying to desperately perfect something that just can't. And perfection is just an idea. It's made up. It's not achievable. And if it is, it's not maintained for very long. In a large sense, that was never going to be the answer, to perfect the body, to perfect the thoughts, to perfect the actions. And this can be quite a dangerous message, because it will challenge all the reasons for why you were living the way you were. Meaning, as long as that sense of self is there, it will try to create a better life for itself, and that's very understandable. And there's also nothing wrong with it. Sometimes that doesn't need to actually change. The physical doesn't need to actually change. This is much more of an internal, energetic dissolving that happens. And whether that seems to be reflected externally, that may happen. There is no control or predicting any of that. But here it felt like the less that was needed, the less that was personally desired and wanted, and then it didn't matter anymore. It didn't matter what fell away, if relationships that I held so dearly, even those were shifting in ways, and there was a time where I thought I had lost them. And maybe internally I did. Because in a way, everything needs to go. Everything needs to be lost completely. Like so thoroughly. Everything goes to absolute nothing, zero. And this is why this can sometimes be seen as a rare so-called happening because it's a horrible place to be honest. To be at absolute zero and to have nothing to hang on to, no safety, and to feel the absolute rawness of that, the real vulnerability of not knowing anything. But in that, through that, then life does become play in a way, not in the sense that you would think. I'm not this rowdy person or anything like that. There is a softness and a not importance to everything, meaning it's okay. Whatever happens is okay because it can never add or subtract anything from me anymore. It's not possible anymore. So before, the sense of self was living on top of the fear, everything it feared, basically, the deepest fears. And now, as this apparent transition happened, now the character is quite similar. The characteristics of the body are quite similar, but now it's not acting from a place of fear, of needing to fulfill itself. It's not acting from a place of lack. It just is free to be the way it is. And therefore, it doesn't need to get things from people. It doesn't expect another to be a certain way. And it doesn't have the energy to harm anyone, including itself. Because it doesn't fulfill in any way at all anymore. And I've noticed here that, just one example, the intense desire to appear physically fit or beautiful is the same as wanting to harm the body, to cause harm. So they're one and the same, which it's coming from the same energy, basically, which I thought was really interesting. And when all of that goes to zero, to act the way it wants, which is very gentle in nature. I could be wrong, that could vary for other characters, perhaps, but that's how it seems here. And that's the same with everything. So so-called relationships that appear, like my mom and dad or family members, I don't expect anything from them. I don't need them to be a certain way. It's just what it is. And there's a subtle joy in being with them. But there isn't an exchange in any way happening. It's just purely what it is. This body is at rest. It's not looking to add to another, like please them. It's not looking to harm them. Or make them feel bad in any way, to get back at them. And again, I still see the innocence in all of that play, because that's just sometimes how it comes, how it expresses when there is a sense of a separate me. And so I'll be honest, like, the personal desires are pretty gone. I do not find travel that interesting, not nearly as the same way as the person did. I don't find movies that interesting. Obviously it depends sometimes, and it's not like it's completely not enjoyable. It's just that it's simply not fulfilling anything. It's on top of this absolute rest, this absolute peace beyond any interpretation or knowing of what that's like, because this isn't a personal feeling. This isn't happiness, contentment, or a personal fulfillment. It's not relatable. It's beyond, it's after the apparent death, illusory death of self. And beyond that, there was always this. There was always this rest. That really, this is what the seeking is searching for, but it has no idea. And it has no idea what it will actually cost for itself, because it is its entire existence. That needs to dissolve. And then yes, ultimately, at the apparent end of the illusion, the end of apparent time, where the timeless is revealed, the absolute rest, no more movement to the next, no more needing another thing, another moment, another happening, no more waiting for anything. That is revealed to have been always the case. Always just readily available here without a location. It's the scariest thing for the person, because the person doesn't get anything here. The person completely dissolves. And by person, it's obvious that there's no one there already. It's just an energetic sense. But this energetic sense is amazing. It just feels like there's an actual entity in this body, and therefore it projects entities everywhere, in every body. But that's not actually the natural reality. It's crazy to say. Not really though, because it's just clear now, but I can see how this would be the craziest thing to say to some ears.